I'll begin with the class. Radhika, I'll start with the class. Yeah. Yesterday we spoke about in the last class what are the factors that are responsible for population explosion, the population change, or the growth in the populations. We have understood about what is mortality, what is fertility, and one more factor which I said it is migration, which is not that much considered for the change in the population because migration may take within the country or from one country to other country. So the change in the population may be not that much affected because of migration, but it is also one of the factors for the population change. Okay. So today I'll just try to talk about, what are the various theories that have been, that explain about the changes in the population and why there is change in the population, why there is growth in the population, why there is decline in the population. But if you look at India, it's such, in India, India has, it is now outcrossed China. Like it is in number one position now. Like India is the highest population is found in India now. Like now it is, as I said in the last class, that can we say it is a boon or a bane? Okay, that you can, this time they may ask you this question like, can population explosion in India considered as a boon or a bane? Probably you may get this question. You should be ready to answer that in your own words. Yeah. Coming back to the world population scenario, like, yes, we all know that world population is unevenly spread all over the globe. It's not the same. As I said you, that Indian population is 136 crore. And we talk about American society, America as a country is it is only 34,000. See the disparity in the population. So that's when we consider the world population is unevenly distributed. So some places have a low concentration of population, like, where we find a desert area is more, a dense forest is more, and mountainous area. Whereas many areas are heavily populated, like, coastal coastal areas or delta plains or moderate, where there is moderate climate and the land is fertile, where industries are in industrial areas or the urban centers, as you all know that, most of the rural areas, people from rural areas are migrating to urban areas because of industrial setup. And that's the reason we could say the population migration is one of the factors over here where the rural population is becoming lesser compared to the urban population. So this spread of population is known as the distribution of population. So we need to understand how the population is distributed. So from the age point of view, from the sex point of view, we can talk about the distribution of population. So if you look at the factors responsible for the distribution of population, then all the factors may be broadly grouped into two categories. Like, one could be the geographical factors, which talks about the latitudes or the altitudes or the relief measures or the climatic conditions, availability of minerals and energy resources, etc. And also the socioeconomic factors. And socioeconomic factors could be industrialization, urbanization, kind of economy existing, political scenario, and public policies. These are the socioeconomic factors which talks about the distribution of population. So when you talk about density is one way of expressing the distribution. And density of population is expressed as the number of person per square kilometer. So it's very important when how do we measure the population explosion? How we say that India is more populated country compared to other countries. So we have to measure that density of population in terms of per person per square kilometer. So this is popularly known as an arithmetic density. Yesterday in the last class, I've discussed about it. So I'm not going to talk about the density or anything here. I will just talk about what are the theories related to keeping the syllabus in point of view. I'll talk about the theories related to population. And there are two important theories that talks about population. One is the Malthusian theory of population. And here you also talk about the post-Malthusian theory, where there's a critique of Malthusian theory. And we also talk about the demographic transition theory. Please keep note of these theories of population because it's one of the frequently asked questions in the examinations. Before that, I would like to talk about migration because I haven't completed about migration because it's also one of the factors for the change in the population. So what do you mean by migration? See, when you talk about migration is a movement of people which involves a large number of people or involves a large number of change or, more change in the place of normal residence of people from one settlement to another. So why does migration occur? Migration occurs due to pull factor as well as push factors. And when you talk about the push factors are those that compel humans to leave, because of inevitable situations in the place of living. And, people maybe drought conditions or inavailability of industries. So inevitable of educational facilities or employment facilities. Most people are being, compelled to move from their place of living. So push factors. So push factors are those that attract human towards a particular place. Like the same, some of the major push factors, like maybe we talk about Afghanistan. That place, most of the people are leaving that place because it has been occupied by other countries. So that could be war or political unrest, poverty, natural calamities, lack of opportunities, as I said, education facilities are not available or employment opportunities are not available. So those are the reasons where people are forced to leave their place of living. Whereas some of the places, some of them are pull factors, like urban areas are considered as one of the major places for which attracts the people, opportunities are there, there is glamour over there, there fertile land is there, availability of employment opportunities are there, education facilities are there, good means of transport is there. So all these can be considered as a pull factor. Okay, so these are the two types of, and when we talk about migration, these are the two factors that talks about migration, pull and push factors. You remember this. And there are two types of migration. One could be internal migration and the other could be the international migration. Okay. So let's say about internal migration. the process of urbanization is so instinct, instinct in the sense to economic and social development, and in consequence, both developed and developed countries are in the process of shifting from predominantly rural to predominantly urban societies. So this could be an internal migration, can be. Because if we talk about India as such, people are migrating from rural areas to urban areas. And in the rural areas are just left with the older population or the women or the children. So most of the productive populations have been migrating to the urban areas. That is the pull factor. Urban areas are considered to be the pull factors. And the proportion of the world population living in urban areas has grown drastically. It's grown drastically from 29%. Like in 1950, we talk about, after the independence, we talk about it was 29%. Now it is, when you talk about the census of 2011 talks about 50% of the population migrating to urban areas. But recent census, we don't have the figures. But as I understand, it is more than 75% people are migrating from rural areas to urban population. Probably we may get our census figures very soon. So migration to cities is contributing to the marked increase of industrialization or urbanization. And this is found in all the countries, not only in India. It is found in all the countries. And today, 8 out of 10 of the world's mega cities are in developing countries. Like India is one of the good example we can cite. And coming back to urban growth in the developing world results more from rural poverty than urban prosperity. So here we have to talk about how it is, giving rise to rural poverty and giving rise to urban prosperity. So rapid rural population growth is again related to it is depending upon the inequitable land distribution. Or if we talk about Indian society as such, caste system prevails and land is not distributed. So talk about their showing that most of the BCs are having 20% of the landlords have more than 10 acres of land, and most of the BC community people have other people, those who are availing this Raitu Bandhu and all. We talk about the people, those who do not have lands, comes the people, Dalits. So that is the reason figures we could have just go through those things. So due to this is inequal land distribution, other than that, we have poor income prospects, which are which is not being seen in the rural areas, and inadequate government investment in agriculture. So all this could be one of the factors which leads to rural poverty and which has a drastic effect on the rural life. And due to unemployment rates in developing countries, the search for jobs is a major reason for migration. Unfortunately, we see migrants arriving in many cities of developing countries find large areas of shanty towns, or we can talk about slums. It gives rise to rise of slums, which is again characterized by high unemployment, pollution, disease, poor sanitary conditions, social disorder, crime, political unrest. All these are the social issues that emerge out of migration, which is most predominantly found in urban areas. For example, if we talk about Mumbai city as such, at least a third of Mumbai, one third of, not one third, more than that I can say, Mumbai lives in slums, okay? So if you go to Bombay, you can find so many slums. And Dharavi is one of the biggest slums. Not only Dharavi, any part of this place, Mumbai you go, you can find slums. Similarly, if you talk about Mexico City is also, if you talk about the world as such, Mexico City is also one of the cities which is surrounded by slums, shanty places and garbage, poor garbage dumps and etc. The cities in most developing nations are similarly circled by squatter settlements, which lack space or safe water sanitation or waste collection, improper lighting facilities, inadequate water, housing facilities, etc. Which is not giving them decent living. So this is all about the internal migration. So the migration that takes place within the country or between the rural to urban areas. That is called as internal migration. Coming back to international migration, international talks about the international economic, political, and cultural interrelations plays an important role in determining the flow of people, movement of people between countries. And its diverse types, international migration is linked to interrelations, that is, between the countries. And international migration both affects and is affected by a development process. And there are broadly two major patterns of internal migrations. One would be south-south migration, and another is north-south migration. So when I talk about south-south migration, this migration is basically between the countries that are emerging as newly industrialized countries and countries at the who are performing performing less well, not that performing. See, for example, if we can talk about these Gulf countries. One could be this example. A key feature of this type of migration is that it is circular rather than permanent. It is not permanent over here. Within this pattern of migration, large number of labor migration takes place, from poor countries. So more laborers have been migrating to this place. The south, richer countries of the south is very prominent. This is called a south-south migration. And that reflects the current global international order associated with globalization. So migration is basically to the oil-rich countries of the Arabian Gulf, we can say, from the non-oil producing countries of the Middle East and highly populous countries of South and East Asia. India is also coming under that. So the vast majority of laborers are, who are migrating to these places are unskilled or semi-skilled. They are also working in construction areas and maintenance, IT, and service industries, etc. So, for example, in Telangana, if we talk about, we can see these laborers are migrating from most prominently from Nizamabad or Karimnagar districts. You can just have these figures also. In this type of migration, maintenance are varied, but definitely better than the migrants of the own country. But the host countries generally do not have much liability because the majority of migrants are temporary and they're staying without their families over here. Therefore, the host government does not have to spend money for their education, neither for their family health, neither for their pensions or any other social security. There is no kind of security being provided to these people, those who are migrating. Just south. So this is called a south-south migration. And another one is south-north migration. When I say south-north migration, in contrast of this pattern of south-south migration, this particular migration, it is somewhat permanent, and any associated problem is entirely different from the south-south migration. So the migrants dominate various sectors of an economy, like transport, like health services, the tourism industry, and some of the manufacturing and other IT sectors as well. So in this type of migration, remittance are definitely better in comparison to the south-south migration. The host have much more liability over here because the majority of migrants are permanent and with their families. Therefore, the host government has to spend huge revenue for their education, for the health, pension, which is not found in the south-south migration. So the most visibly negative impact of south-north migration is the brain drain. Okay, maybe we can talk about this negative aspect because the most intellectual, productive population is found there, and they're working for those countries. The source country spends a huge amount on education to develop skill. The most of children are going migrating. Once they finish their engineering or they go there to their MS and they serve those countries. Okay, and there is the reason we talk about brain drain here. The source countries spend a huge amount of money on education to develop skilled manpower, but ultimately this skilled manpower, what is happening, does not pay back adequately to their country, to the source country. in terms of their services for remittance. In spite of we know all these things, we do these mistakes of sending our children abroad. Okay, so this is about the migration. Just I want to put the reflection on that. So whenever you get a question like what is migration, type of what is migration, what are the factors of migration, that is pull and push factor, and the types of migration it is, internal migration and international migration. I think this part you can easily write. Huh? Sometimes in a short question, you may be asked like, what is the different summary of the economic effects of emigration? I'm not going to talk about that here, but you get this question in your. Yeah. Now coming back to the theory of population or theories of population. The important theories or models that explains the linkage between population and development. Okay? So this theory is like whether we call it Malthusian theory or the demographic transition theory. There's example of population affecting development. Whereas Malthusian theory talks about population affecting development. Whereas the demographic transition model is an example of how development affects population. Okay, so let us talk about what do you mean by Malthusian theory. So when we talk about Malthusian theory, this particular theory was been developed by Thomas Malthusian in the year 1798, and he please note down this 1798, and he has written a book on the population, that is one famous book called as the population. The principles of population in the year 1750. So here he tries to describe the theory of quantitative development of human population. So as I said to you earlier, that it is, Malthusian theory talks about how population is affecting the development. He has spoken, he has given his own thoughts, and it is not just what he has experienced. It's an empirical work been given by him. So here in this particular theory, Malthus tried to talk about the factors that are responsible for the growth in population and its effects in the development process. So between 1798 and 1826, Malthus published 6 editions of his famous treatise, that is the Principles of Population. And in this, he has addressed, one second. One second. He has published 6 editions of his famous treatise, updating each edition to incorporate new material to address criticism, because he was been, as I said, he was being criticized for his works. And he has written his original text in reaction to the optimism of his father and his father's associate, especially Rousseau, regarding the future information. One second. So Malthus regarded ideals of future improvement of humanity with skepticism, considering that throughout history, a segment of every human population seemed relegated to poverty. So he explained this phenomena by pointing out that population growth generally preceded expansion of the population resources, in particular the primary resources of food. By developing his theory, Malthus proposed 2 postulates. One is, what is that postulate? First one is, food is necessary for the existence of man. Okay, and food. The andaki telsu that food is avsaram. Prati manishiki avsaram food, necessary for the existence of man. Second postulate em chepparante, the passion between the sexes is necessary and will remain nearly in its present state. So based on this two postulates, he made the following assertion. Okay. See, as I said you that, food is necessary. The power of population is indefinitely greater than the power on the earth to produce subsistence for man. Okay. So we have to depend upon the land for our subsistence, for our food. So when the population went unchecked, okay, it is not, if the growth of the population is unchecked, it increases in geometric ratio. So subsistence increase only in arithmetic ratio. So a slight acquaintance with numbers will show the immensity of the first power in comparison to the second. And next in Chapparante, in all societies, even those that are most vicious, the tendency to vicious attachment is so much stronger that there is a constant effort towards an increase of population. This constant effort as constantly tends to subject the lower classes of society to distress and to prevent any great permanent amelioration of the condition. So Malthus also saw that societies through history had experienced at one time or another epidemics, famines, or wars that marks a fundamental problem of populations overstretching their resource limitation. The solution in Chappadin, what solution he has given over here? He has said that Malthus argued that population was held within resource limits. Until ఎంతమంది population ఉంటే అంత వాళ్ళకి land కూడా భరించే capacity ఉంటుంది. So Malthus argued that population was held within resource limits by two types of checks. One is positive one. Positive one and the positive check, which raised the death rate, and preventive one, which lowered the birth rate. And then Malthus argued that population was held within resource limits by two types of check, positive check and the preventive check. Positive chapter which raised the death rate, death chawulu, ante famines, epidemics, wars wala jarige chawulu, and preventive one ante lowered the birth rate, ante పిల్లల కారణం బర్త్ రేట్ తగ్గించడం ఎలా. సో పాజిటివ్ చెక్ లో ఏం చెప్పిందంటే ఇన్క్లూడ్స్ హంగర్ కావచ్చు, డిసీజ్ కావచ్చు, వార్ కావచ్చు. అంటే ప్రివెంటివ్ చెక్ లో ఏం చెప్తుందంటే అబార్షన్ చేయించుకోవడము, బర్త్ కంట్రోల్ చేయడము, ఓకే, ఇవన్నీ పోస్ట్పోన్మెంట్ ఆఫ్ మ్యారేజ్ అండ్ సెలిబేసీ, అంటే పెళ్లి కాకుండా ఉండడము, ఓకే, ఆల్ దీస్ థింగ్స్. సో దిస్ ఈస్ హౌ వీ కెన్ టూ టైప్స్ ఆఫ్ చెక్స్ చెప్పారు, పాజిటివ్ చెక్ అండ్ ప్రివెంటివ్ చెక్. In the second and subsequent edition, Malthus put more emphasis on moral restraint. Like, by that you meant that postponement of marriage until, people could support a family. ఇప్పుడు జరిగే పని అదే కదా, చాలా మంది పెళ్లిళ్ళు ఎంత చేసుకోరు, ఎప్పటిదాకా సంపాదించారు అప్పటిదాకా పెళ్లి చేసుకోరు. Okay, so this could be one of the reasons population can be checked. Apart from that, couple with strict celibacy until that time, okay, not losing their virginity or anything like that. Like that. He went so far to claim that moral restraints on a wide scale was the best means. Okay, indeed the only means of easing the poverty of the lower classes. This plan appeared consistent with virtue, economic gain, and social improvement. So this particular theory of his was being criticized by many. What was the criticism was that Malthus' basic premise on clashing between sexes has been questioned on the plea that the desire to have children cannot be mixed with passion and desire. Is it? Every person who gets into marriage would like to have children, and it is one of the thing everybody wants. And desire for sex. Desire for sex is a biological instinct, while the desire to have children is a social instinct. So both are different. Second criticism, the validity of two ratios proposed by Malthus was also questioned on the basis of empirical evidences that populations have rarely grown by geometric progression. Similarly, production of food rarely a figure chapaleru, just random ga chapaleru. And third in Japan, the time span of 25 years assumed by Malthus for doubling of population also does not seem to be anywhere near reality, because it varies from country to country, depending upon demographic situation of the particular country. For example, if we take Mexico, only 20 years to double the population, whereas USA, which is the adjoining country, took 120 years to the same. Even India also is sailing the same boat like Mexico. Every year in India, the population is growing at a rapid level. So Malthus also seem to be swayed by the supremacy of positive checks like delayed marriage or moral restraints and control frequency of sex after marriage. It is rather strange that Malthus could not think of the use of contraceptives as an effective preventive check, despite the fact that Malthus very much knew about it. Okay, and Malthus has been severely criticized for ignoring the role of changing technology and changing the changes in the socio-economic setup of a society. This is all about the Malthusian theory and its criticism. Okay, this is all about the reaction to Malthusian ideas. To Marxism. A neo-Malthusian is somebody who sides with Malthus belief, who abide by what Malthus says. The neo-Malthusian theories may be presented as a splinter group, like essentially they agree with Malthus that control of population is inevitable and have pessimistic view that consider the growth of world population with fear and alarm. However, they disagree with Malthus that factors like war and famine are the key to population control and reject such simplistic notions. Instead, they could promote a number of ideals. For example, Planned Parenthood as a method of population control. Marxism point of Malthus' idea came from the middle of the 19th century with the writings of Karl Marx, 1867, and Friedrich Engels. Engels and Marx argued that what Malthus saw as a problem of pressure of population, the means of production, actually represented the pressure of the means of production and population. Okay, means of production. So they this view in terms of the concept of the reserve army of labor. Like reserve army of labor is a concept given by Karl Marx, Critique of Political Economy, and it refers basically to the unemployed in the capitalist society. The use of the word army here refers to the workers being conscripted and regimented in the workplace in a hierarchy. So under the command or authority of the owners of owners of capital, maybe capitalist society, the capitalists. In other words, if you look into this, the seeming excess of population that Malthus attributed to the seemingly innate disposition of poor to reproduce beyond their needs, which actually emerges the product of the very dynamics of capitalist economy. So Engels called Malthus' hypothesis the crudest, more barbarous theory that ever existed. It's a system of despair which struck down all those beautiful phrases about love thy neighbor and world citizenship. So they criticize Malthus at the capital level. Next theory talks about the demographic transition theory. As I said, the demographic transition theory is that development that affected population. Okay, that's what I said initially. Development that affected population. Population affected. The development affects population. Yes. Yeah, coming back to this theory, demographic transition theory. It's a model actually. Demographic transition model. The model used to represent the process of explaining the transformation of countries from high birth rate and high death rate to low birth rate and low death rate as part of the this economic development of a country from a pre-industrial economy to an industrial economy. It is based on an interpretation which began in 1929 by an American demographer called Warren Thompson. Here, demographic transition model of Warren Thompson in an American demographer of prior observed changes or transition birth and death rates in industrial societies over the past 200 years. The most developed countries are beyond stage 3 of the model, that is, the majority of developing countries are in stage 2 or stage 3. The model was based on the changes seen in Europe. So these countries follow the DTM model relatively well. Most of the European countries follow the demographic transition model. Okay. So many developing countries have moved into stage 3. Like India also. Traditionally, what does transition involve? It involves 4 stages. But later on, a 5th stage called deindustrialization was added by various theories to explain the economic transition from manufacturing-based industries into service and information-based industries. So in stage 1, in stage 1, pre-industrial society. Okay? Death rates and birth rates are high and roughly in balance. Death rates good ekkunne, inka birth rates good ekku. The balance on the stage 2 lo emundi? There are developing countries, death rates drop rapidly due to improvements in food supply and sanitation, which increases lifespan and reduces disease. This change usually come about due to improvement in farming techniques, access to technology, basic healthcare and education. So without a corresponding fall in birth rate, this produces an imbalance. And the countries in this stage experience a large increase in population. Ante kada. Death rate తగ్గిపోతుంది, మళ్ళీ birth rate అట్లాగే పెరుగుతూనే ఉంది. అక్కడ ఏమవుతుంది? ఇంబ్యాలెన్స్ అయిపోతుంది. ఫస్ట్ స్టేజ్ లో బ్యాలెన్స్ ఉంది. థర్డ్ స్టేజ్ ఏముందంటే birth rate falls due to access to contraception, increase in wages, urbanization, a reduction in subsistence agriculture, an increase in the status and education of women, and reduction in the value of children's work. మనం ఇండియా ఏ స్టేజ్ లో వస్తుందో చెప్పాలి. సెకండ్ స్టేజ్ లో వస్తుందా లేదా థర్డ్ స్టేజ్ లో ఉంటుందా? నేను సెకండ్ స్టేజ్ లో ఏం చెప్పాను, ఇక్కడ డెత్ రేట్ డ్రాప్ ర్యాపిడ్లీ డ్యూ టు ఇంప్రూవ్మెంట్ ఫుడ్ సప్లై, శానిటేషన్, హెల్త్ కేర్ ఫెసిలిటీస్, ఎడ్యుకేషన్ అని చెప్పాను కదా. సో బర్త్ రేట్ పెరుగుతుంది, డెత్ రేట్ తగ్గిపోతుంది. సో మనం ఇక్కడ ఇండియా ఏ స్టేజ్ చెప్పచ్చు? ఇన్ స్టేజ్ 3 లో ఏంటి? బర్త్ రేట్స్ ఫాల్స్ డ్యూ టు యాక్సెస్ టు కాంట్రాసెప్షన్స్ అంటే family planning methods, increase in wages, urbanization, a reduction in subsistence agriculture, an increase in the status and education of women, a reduction in the value of children's work, an increase in parental investment in the education of children and other social changes. The population growth begins to level off here. And during stage 4, there are both low birth rates and low death rates. Okay? You think low birth rates lo ralem man, low death rates lo unnam man. So birth rates may drop to well below replacement level, as has happened in countries like Germany, Italy and Japan jarugutunnevi, leading to a shrinking population. Shrinking population Japan, Italy, Germany lo kanipistayi, that and threat to many industries that rely on population growth. So as a large group born during stage 2 ages, it creates an economic burden on the shrinking working population. Old people ఎక్కువైపోతారు. Death rate may remain consistently low or increases slightly due to increase in lifestyle disease due to low exercise levels or high obesity, sugar, aging population in developed countries. మనకి డెవలప్డ్ కంట్రీస్ ప్రాబ్లం ఏంటంటే ఓల్డ్ పీపుల్ ఎక్కువ అవుతున్నారు, రోగాలతో చనిపోయేటోళ్ళు ఎక్కువ అవుతున్నారు. Consistently low, increase slightly due to increase in even problems, health problems. Okay, so the original DMT has four stages. Okay, development transition model of 4 stages. However, some theories consider that a 5th stage is needed to represent countries that have undergone the economic transition from manufactured-based industries into service and information-based industries called deindustrialization. Okay, countries such as United Kingdom, like India. Okay, London. The earliest notion universally recognized, stage 5, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, and most notably Japan, whose populations are now reproducing well below the replacement level and not producing enough children to replace their parents' generation. The 5th stage go ravalante. Okay, so this is all about the demographic transition theory. And there is a critical evaluation of this theory as well. As with all models, this is an idealized picture of population change. Like, it has to be remembered that demographic transition model is only a model and cannot necessarily predict the future. It has, however, given an indication of whether the future birth and death rates may be for a country together with the total population size. Therefore, there are limitations to it, as with any model. So, most particularly, of course, the DTM makes no comment on change in population due to migration. Second evaluation ఏంటంటే non-applicability to less developed countries. The DTM has a questionable applicability to developing countries where, information access is limited. For example, this particular model has been validated primarily in Europe and North America, where, demographic data exists, existing over centuries, whereas high quality demographic data for most developing countries did not become widely available until the mid 20th century. India comes under that. And if you talk about DTM, does not account for recent phenomena such as, in HIV, AIDS, or AIDS in these areas. HIV is because the leading cause of mortality. Now, if you talk about, we are combating that problem as well. And coming back to the generalization from our European experience, this particular model is most applicably to European countries. It also contains a hypothesis that, other countries would follow this particular model, or this. It cannot be generalized, in fact. DTM assumes that countries will go through all the stages. Some countries may even skip stages. The demographic data for developing countries span about 5 decades, leading to questionable extrapolation from the experience of the most developed countries. So we cannot consider that. And the fourth one can be the economic development not sufficient cause to affect demographic change. So this particular model assumes that population changes are induced by industrial changes and increased wealth without taking into account the role of social change in determining the birth rate. Example, the education of women. So in recent decades, more work has been done on developing the social mechanism between it. And this particular model assumes that the birth rate is independent of the death rate. Nevertheless, demographer also maintains that there is no historical evidence for society-wide fertility rates is rising significantly after having high mortality events. So notably, some historic populations have taken many years to replace life, such as Black Death. So I will not go into history over here. Okay. This is all about the two theories which talks about the population and development. The Malthus theory talks about population affecting development, and demographic transformation talks about development affecting the population. We talk about this, okay? So as I just to wind up towards the end, I could just say that population growth is not a real problem. We can add this answer to your, because the recent changes that are taking place in India, you can add this point to that. So we can identify 3 general lines of argument of the part of this. Those individuals, primarily for the developing countries, assert that the problem is not population growth, but some other issues. Okay, first one. Population growth is a deliberately created false issue under it. And for many countries and regions, population growth is in fact desirable, it's required. Okay. So first one, if I say the problem is not about population growth, but some other issue. Like if we talk about some issue under underdevelopment. Like, if correct strategies are pushed which lead to higher levels of living, greater esteem, and expanded freedom, then population will take care of itself. Eventually, it will disappear as a problem, as it has in all the present day economically advanced nations. And according to this particular argument, underdevelopment is the real problem, underdevelopment. Economic progress and social mechanism will more or less automatically regulate population growth and distribution. As long as the vast majority of people in the developing countries remain impoverished or uneducated and physically and psychologically weak, the large families will constitute the only real source of social security. They have to get educated, okay? They have to get impoverished. They have to be psychologically, physiologically strong. Because underdevelopment is one of the reasons. The actual problem is not with the population growth. Okay? The other aspect which talks about this is the world resource depletion and environmental destruction. And it was primarily caused by the developed nation. The fact is that developed countries with less than 25% of the world population consume almost 80% of the world resources. Look at this. And according to this argument, the developed nations should curtail or cut back on their excessively high consumption standards rather than having the less developed nations restrict their population growth. And later, high fertility rate is really due to their low levels of living. It is a combination of rising affluence, self-consumption habits in rich countries, and among rich countries, habits in rich countries, and among rich people in poor countries, which should be the world's major concern, not population growth. Okay. And next is population distribution. See, the third line of argument is that it is not numbers of people per se which are causing population problem, but their distribution in space. See, many regions of the world, example, parts of Saharan Africa and in Amazon region of Brazil are in fact underpopulated in terms of available potential resources. Others simply have too many people constituting smaller area. Okay. So what is needed, therefore, instead of moderating the quantitative rate of population growth, the government's efforts should be to reduce rural-urban migration. Okay. And to bring about a more spatial distribution of population in terms of available land and other productive resources. Okay. Next is the subordination of women. Population growth is a natural outcome of women's lack of economic opportunity. The argument is that if women's health, education, and economic well-being are not improved, along with their role and status in the family and the community, this empowered women will inevitably lead to smaller families and lower population growth. Here, what to see is that women has to be educated. Women has to be made economically independent. Then she will ensure that, we will ensure that population should not grow. Okay. Next aspect, next argument I said you that is a deliberately created false issue. So this particular line of argument talks about the dependency theory of underdevelopment. Basically, it is argued that the frenetic overconcern in the rich nations with the population growth of poor nations is in reality an attempt by the former to hold down the development of the latter. See, for example, rich countries are pressuring poor nations to adopt aggressive population control measures, even though these themselves went through a period of sizable population increase, which actually accelerated their own development process. So this argument views population control efforts by rich countries and the elite international agencies as racist or genocidal attempts to reduce the relative or absolute size of those poor, largely non-white population of the world, who may someday pose a serious threat to the welfare of the rich, predominantly white population. So here it's an argument, you just need to understand this. Next is the growth in desirable phenomena. So a more conventional economic argument is that population growth in many developing countries is in fact desirable to stimulate economic development. Okay? Economic development. So large populations provide the needed consumer demands to generate favorable economic upscales in production, to lower production costs, and to provide a sufficient and low-cost labor supply to achieve higher output levels. Moreover, it's also argued that many rural regions in the developing countries of Africa, Latin America, and even parts of Asia are underpopulated in the sense that there is much unused but arable land that could yield large increase in agricultural output if only more people were available to cultivate land. I think this is a fact. Three other non-economic arguments put forward by developing countries also complete this viewpoint. First, many countries claim a need for population growth to protect currently underpopulated border regions against any expansion intention neighboring nations. Second, there are many ethnic, racial, religious groups within developing countries whose differential attitudes towards family size have to be produced both for moral and political reasons. So no argument, I'm not making a criticism over here. You can understand what I mean to say over here. And nearly military and political power is often seen as a dependent on large and youthful population. I think India, it could be a positive effect for India. So population growth is a real problem. Yes, it is a real problem. It's a threat, in fact. So the extreme version of the population as a serious problem position attempts to attribute almost all the world's economic and social evils to excessive population growth. So here, the unrestrained population increase is seen as a major crisis facing mankind today. It is claimed to be a principal cause of poverty. Okay. So lack of low levels of living, malnutrition, ill health, environmental degradation, and wide array of other social problems. So value-laden and incendiary words such as population bomb or population explosion are tossed around at will. Indeed, the dire predictions of the world food catastrophes and ecological disaster are attributed almost entirely to the growth of the number of people. So it is a real problem. So I look it as a problem. Population growth can be seen as a problem because it has its negative consequences because it leads to increase in poverty. It retards economic growth. It gives rise to the problems of food scarcity and security. Unemployment could be one of the reasons. Education, people, large families and low income tend to restrict parents to provide education to all the children. In this situation, it has been observed that, particularly in developing countries like India, preference is given to male children. Okay. So rapid population growth also affects quality of education as the government has less funds to address quality education or to provide education equal to everyone or to provide the needs, fulfill the needs of the learners. And this directly affects the development of human capital. Okay. So education is one thing. It is affecting education, in turn affecting the human capital. Health is one of the factors. High fertility harms health of mothers and children. It also increases health risk of pregnant mothers. It not only affects mothers, but also affects newborn children. I spoke about fecundity and infant mortality in terms of low birth weights as well as increased infant mortality rate. Environment degradation is also negative consequences like the Earth's carrying capacities is burdened not only by the demand of the growing population, but also by food requirements by millions of livestock. This led to the clearing of land for cattle ranching and overgrazing by livestock. But the farmer is an important factor in tropical deforestation. The latter is a major cause of desertification and soil loss in many countries. Therefore, it has been argued that population growth leads to various environmental degradation like deforestation, desertification and soil erosion, declining fish and animal resources, air and water population, etc. This is all about the theories of population. Now, you can talk about the population policies, more specifically in India. We'll talk about that next class. Anything you want to please tell me. So what I mean to say here is that population development has very close relationship because, human beings are at the center of concern for any development activities. And people are the most important and invaluable resource of any nation. Therefore, there's a need to understand the complex relationship between population and development. And there's a need to study the various aspects of populations and related theories and hypotheses. On the aspect nature. Okay. Anything, please tell me. I think only Radhika was there in the class. Radhika, shall I take leave? Hello, Radhika. Hello, Radhika. Radhika. Hello. Hello. Hello, Sai.
Hello.
Sai.
Madam.
అయిపోయిందన్న క్లాస్
అయిపోయిందా? ఓకే ఓకే మేడం.
థియరీస్ చెప్పాను, ప్లస్ ఇంకా ఏం చెప్పానంటే మైగ్రేషన్ గురించి చెప్పాను ఫస్ట్, తర్వాత థియరీస్ గురించి చెప్పాను. మీకు మెటీరియల్ నేను ఫార్వర్డ్ చేస్తాను. మీ దగ్గర
ఓకే
అంబేద్కర్ మెటీరియల్ ఉంది కదా మీ దగ్గర?
మేడం రాలేదు మేడం, నాకు ఇంకా మా సైడ్
ఇంకా
రాలేదు.
రాలేదు. నేను నా దగ్గర ఉంది, మీకు ఫోటో పంపిస్తాను మీకు. నేను అది మీరు చదవండి అందులోకి వెళ్ళి, సరేనా?
ఓకే మేడం, వాట్సాప్ చేస్తారా?
మీకు మెసేజ్ లో కూడా నెక్స్ట్ క్లాస్ మీకు కొన్ని క్వశ్చన్స్ ఇస్తాను, దాన్ని మీరు ఇంపార్టెంట్ క్వశ్చన్స్ లాగా ఇస్తాను, అది మీరు చదవండి అవి, సరేనా?
ఓకే ఓకే, థ్యాంక్ యూ మేడం. ఇవ్వండి
ఓకే
మేడం.
నాన్న, థ్యాంక్ యూ సో మచ్. ఆల్ ది బెస్ట్, బాయ్.
ఓకే మేడం. పంపించనా? ఎంతమందిరా?